There is a moment that changes everything, and it almost never looks the way you expected it to look. You imagine that if things ever shifted, it would be because they finally understood you. You imagine the apology. You imagine the recognition. You imagine the moment they would finally see everything you gave, everything you tried to explain, everything you were willing to sacrifice. But the real turning point is quieter than that. It happens the moment you stop chasing. And here is what almost no one tells you. When you stop chasing the narcissist, the most important change does not happen in them. It happens inside you. You spent so long trying to be understood, chosen, reassured, believed. You poured your energy into proving that you were worth staying for. And the strange, almost disorienting truth is this. The person who exhausted themselves trying to be seen becomes psychologically different the moment they stop performing for someone who kept moving the finish line. Not because you won, not because they changed, but because you finally turned your attention back toward yourself. If this is something you are living through right now, I want you to stay with me because what I am about to explain may help you understand things you have felt but could not name. And if this kind of grounded, psychologically honest conversation is something you need more of, take a moment to subscribe. This channel exists to help you understand narcissistic relationship dynamics, boundaries, healing, and self-worth in a way that respects your intelligence and your pain. Subscribing means you will not have to search for clarity alone. So let us begin where it actually begins, with the chase. The chase rarely feels like chasing while you are inside it. It feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It feels like being the only one mature enough, patient enough, understanding enough to hold the relationship together. You send one more message, you offer one more explanation, you try one more time to make them understand what you meant, what you needed, what you never got. You replay conversations searching for the sentence that would have finally landed. You believe that if you could just explain it clearly enough, calmly enough, lovingly enough, they would finally understand and everything would change. This is not weakness. This is not foolishness. This is a deeply human response to a specific kind of conditioning. And to stop blaming yourself, you have to understand the mechanism underneath it. Psychologists use a term called intermittent reinforcement. It describes what happens when a reward is given unpredictably rather than consistently. When affection, warmth, and attention arrive on a random schedule, sometimes present, sometimes withdrawn, the human brain does something counterintuitive. It does not detach. It attaches harder. Uncertainty does not weaken the pull. It intensifies it. This is one of the most powerful patterns in behavioral conditioning, and it does not require anything wrong with you for it to work. It works on almost everyone. So when someone was warm and then cold, present and then distant, loving and then dismissive, you were not simply reacting to a difficult person. You were caught in a cycle that trains the nervous system to keep reaching for the next moment of connection. The inconsistency itself became the hook. And the more inconsistent the affection, the more you chased it, because your mind kept telling you the good version of them was the real version. And if you just tried hard enough, you could bring it back. This is often what people mean when they talk about a trauma bond. It is a widely used term, and it is worth being honest that it describes an experience more than a precise clinical diagnosis. But the experience is real. It is the powerful attachment that can form to someone who alternates between causing distress and offering relief. When the same person is the source of your pain and the source of your comfort, the bond can feel almost impossible to break by willpower alone. Not because you are broken, because you are human. And this pattern exploits something universal in human attachment. Now, here's a distinction that will begin to set you free. There is a difference between caring about someone and chasing someone. Caring is something that can live quietly inside you. Chasing requires their participation. Caring does not demand access. Chasing demands a response. You can understand someone deeply. You can even feel compassion for the wounds that shape them, and still recognize that understanding their pain does not obligate you to absorb it. Compassion does not require unlimited access to you. Empathy was never meant to be a doorway that anyone can walk through at any time, no matter how they treat you once they are inside. This is the part that empathic people struggle with most, because your empathy is real. Your ability to see the frightened, wounded part of another person is a genuine gift, but a gift can be misdirected. And when your empathy consistently costs you your peace, your stability, your sense of self, it is no longer empathy in its healthy form. It has quietly become self abandonment. Sit with that word, self abandonment. It is the moment you leave yourself in order to stay close to someone else. It is the moment you override your own needs, your own instincts, your own limits, because staying connected to them feels more urgent than staying connected to yourself. And the tragedy is that empathic people often do not even notice they are doing it because it feels like love. It feels like being good. It feels like being the bigger person. So, what happens when you stop? At first, not what you hoped. This is important because so much content pretends that the moment you stop chasing, they will panic, return, and beg for you. Maybe they will react. Maybe they will not. Maybe they will reach out. Maybe they will move on as if nothing happened. You do not get to control that, and honestly, you should not build your healing around predicting it. The real transformation is not about their reaction. It is about what begins to happen inside you when you stop organizing your entire inner world around them. When you stop reacting automatically, something subtle begins. A small space opens between the trigger and your response. In that space, you start to notice how much of your emotional life was outsourced, how often your mood depended on their tone, how often your sense of worth rose and fell with their approval. This is the beginning of a shift from external validation toward internal validation, from needing them to confirm your value toward being able to hold your own value even when no one is confirming it. Let me be clear about something because it matters. Reducing contact and stepping back into silence should not be understood as a tactic to punish them or manipulate them into chasing you. If you go quiet as a strategy to provoke a reaction, you are still chasing. You are just doing it silently. Real disengagement is different. It is not a weapon aimed at them. It is a boundary drawn around you. It is you deciding what you will participate in, not a scheme to control what they do. And when you stop explaining yourself, you begin to see how the explaining was never really working. Repeated explanation in an unhealthy dynamic often becomes its own trap. You explain, they twist it, you explain again, they minimize it, and each round pulls you deeper into a conversation that was never designed to reach understanding. At some point, the healthiest thing you can do is recognize that not every person is a safe place to set down your truth. Some explanations are only ever used against you. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you confront a hard and liberating fact. Self-worth cannot be secured by winning approval from someone who keeps destabilizing you. If your value depends on convincing an unpredictable person to finally validate you, then your value will always be unstable because it is being held by unstable hands. The moment you stop reaching for that approval is the moment you begin to take your worth back into your own keeping. And when you stop monitoring their reactions, something quiet and powerful shifts. Because attention itself is part of the attachment. Checking their messages, checking their social media, watching for signs of jealousy, signs of regret, signs that they miss you. Every time you check, you are still feeding the connection, even without contact. You are keeping the relationship alive inside your own mind. Letting go of the monitoring is not coldness. It is you slowly reclaiming your own focus. I want to pause here because this next part is where many people quietly give up. If this conversation is reaching something real in you, subscribe so you can keep walking through this, because what comes next is the hardest stretch, and no one should face it without honest guidance. Here is the truth. The stage right after you stop chasing can feel terrible. Not peaceful, not empowered. Terrible. You may feel doubt, you may feel lonely, you may feel guilt, as if you did something cruel by protecting yourself. You may feel anxiety, urges to reconnect, a desperate second guessing that whispers maybe it was not that bad, maybe you overreacted, maybe you should send one more message. This is not a sign that you made the wrong choice. This is what withdrawal from an intermittent reinforcement cycle actually feels like. And there is another layer. The absence of chaos can feel unfamiliar. When you have lived inside emotional unpredictability for a long time, your nervous system adapts to it. The highs and lows, the tension and relief become a kind of baseline. So when the chaos stops, the calm does not immediately feel like peace. It can feel like emptiness. It can feel like something is missing. Please hear this clearly. That emptiness is not proof that you need them back. It is your nervous system recalibrating to safety after being trained to expect storms. Calm feels wrong at first, only because chaos felt normal for too long. This is also where cognitive dissonance lives. Part of you knows the relationship harmed you. Another part of you clings to the memory of who they were on their best days. Holding both at once is deeply uncomfortable, and the mind wants to resolve the discomfort, often by rewriting the past into something softer than it was. Naming this dissonance helps you resist it. You do not have to choose the comforting story. You can hold the whole truth even when it aches. And slowly, if you stay, something begins to rebuild. Self-trust. It does not return in one dramatic moment. It returns through small, consistent decisions. Every time you honor a boundary you set, you send yourself a message. My needs matter. My safety matters. My word to myself means something. Each kept promise, no matter how small, is a deposit into a bank of self-respect that the relationship had slowly drained. Let me clarify what a boundary actually is, because it is one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of this. A boundary is not a threat. It is not a punishment. It is not a demand that another person change. A boundary is a decision about what you will participate in and what you will do when a limit is crossed. It is not aimed at controlling them. It is aimed at guiding yourself. You cannot force anyone to respect you, but you can decide what you will and will not remain present for. As this continues, you become less reactive, and I want to be precise here, because emotional regulation is not the same as emotional suppression. The goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is not to become numb or hard. The goal is to stop letting every feeling automatically dictate your behavior. You can feel the urge to reach out and choose not to act on it. You can feel the ache of missing them and still keep your boundary. Feeling and acting become two separate things, and that separation is where your freedom grows. Somewhere along this path, the central question of your inner life begins to change. For so long you asked, why are they doing this to me? Why can they not see me? Why is this not enough? Those questions kept your focus locked on them, waiting for an answer that was never going to come. And then, gradually, a different question rises. What do I need to do for myself now? That single shift from analyzing them to caring for yourself is one of the most powerful turns a person can make. But before the strength, there is grief, and you must let yourself grieve, because if you skip it, it waits for you later. You are not only grieving the relationship, you are grieving the future you imagined with them. You are grieving the version of them you kept hoping would finally appear, the one you caught glimpses of, the one you believed was the real them. You are grieving the potential you were sure was there, and you are grieving something else, something tender, the version of yourself that existed before all of this, the you who trusted more easily, who was not so vigilant, who had not yet learned to brace. Do not rush this grief. Do not shame yourself for it. Grieving someone who hurt you is not a contradiction. It is a sign that your heart is intact. Let it move through you. It will not stay forever, but it needs to be felt, not skipped. And here is a distinction that can carry you further. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. You can release resentment without reopening the door. You can let go of the bitterness that poisons you without inviting the person back into your life. Forgiveness, if you choose it, can be something you do for your own freedom. It does not require access. It does not require contact. It does not require them at all. The same is true of closure. We are taught that closure comes from the other person, from a final conversation, a full apology, an acknowledgement of everything. But chasing closure from an emotionally unsafe person often keeps the wound open, because they will keep giving you just enough to pull you back and never enough to set you free. Sometimes closure does not come from them. Sometimes it comes from you, from the moment you look at the pattern clearly and decide you no longer need another explanation to move forward. And there is a sentence that, when it finally becomes true for you, marks a turning point. I do not need them to understand my pain in order for my pain to be real. Read that again. Your pain does not require their validation to exist. It was real when they denied it. It was real when they minimized it. It is real now, and you no longer need their signature on it to believe yourself. This is what recovery actually is. It is not becoming cold, it is becoming discerning. It is not losing your empathy. It is learning where your empathy belongs and where it does not. It is not becoming incapable of love. It is refusing to abandon yourself in the name of love. The gift was never the problem. The problem was giving it to someone who kept treating it as something to exploit. So you begin to rebuild an identity outside of them. You reconnect with the parts of you that got buried, your values, your friendships that quietly faded while you were consumed, the interests you set aside, the goals you shelved, the routines that once grounded you, the creativity that used to flow before your energy was rerouted into managing someone else's moods. This is not distraction. This is restoration. You are gathering yourself back from the places you scattered. And little by little, the vigilance eases. The constant scanning, the anticipating, the walking on eggshells that your body learned as survival begins to loosen. You catch yourself going hours, then days, without ruminating. The intrusive replaying slows. The mind, which was trained to stay on high alert, finally begins to rest. This is your nervous system learning that the danger has passed. This is safety becoming real. So let me bring you to the deepest truth in all of this, the one that lives underneath the title itself. The most profound transformation is not making the narcissist chase you. It is no longer needing them to chase you at all. The goal is not revenge. The goal is not to make them regret losing you. The goal is not to make them jealous. The goal is not to finally prove that you were valuable all along. Every one of those goals still ties your piece to their reaction. Every one of them keeps a thread connected. The real goal, the only one that sets you free, is to return to yourself, to choose your own steadiness over their chaos, to choose your own dignity over the exhausting hope that they will change, to choose the quiet, unglamorous, genuine peace of a life where your worth is no longer up for negotiation. You do not have to win. You do not have to be understood by them. You do not have to be chosen by someone who could not hold what you offered. You only have to stop leaving yourself behind. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you turn around and find that the person you were searching for, the one who would finally see you, protect you, and choose you, was you all along, not chasing anymore, just home. If this reached you, if it named something you have been carrying, subscribe and stay. This channel will keep walking with you through narcissistic relationship dynamics, boundaries, healing, self-worth, and the slow, real work of rebuilding. You do not have to keep searching for clarity alone. Come back, keep going, and keep choosing yourself.